Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go see Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. I don't know what Elijah did with Connor Clark, but maybe we'll see Connor next week. Excited to spend the rest of the afternoon with Hail Varsity. Numbers to get in. Can join us today. 466-3776. 466-3776. 800-825-5865. Can watch the show. You're encouraged to do so. Hail Varsity YouTube channel. That's where you get everything, right? You get all the post-practice reports. You get all the post-press conference video. Always good stuff from Aaron Sorensen and Brady Altmans and company. Can watch that. Hail Varsity's YouTube channel. Can stream us many different ways, radio and or on Twitter at Hail Varsity Radio's Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio. And then ESPN Lincoln allows you to watch and participate. ESPN Lincoln Twitter, ESPN Lincoln Facebook, and wherever you hear us around the great state of Nebraska. Can email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Pretty newsworthy day, Elijah, and it kicked off about 12 hours, 15 hours ago when things kind of finalized with the announcement right when we got done. Well, I'm doing poor math. Forgive me in my broadcast background. 22 hours ago. Carry the one, right? 22 hours ago, Nebraska getting just a monster commit from the portal, Walter Rouse. Standout tackle with the Stanford Cardinal, is coming to play his ball in Lincoln this fall. We'll have some thoughts on Walter here in a moment. Plenty more from E.J. Barthel, Nebraska's running backs coach, Evan Cooper, Nebraska's secondary coach. Big appreciation to Brando's Sports World for shouting us out. We shout you out, Brando. And plenty to get to. Brandon Vogel will join us in 20 minutes. Recap his thoughts with the week that has been. In hour two, Gary Barnett, he weighs in. He's seen plenty of Walter Rouse. What does he think Nebraska has on the offensive line? And we'll get into that youth versus experience discussion point as we look at Coach Rule's staff and some of the younger hires he's made. What's Coach Barney think of that? And then Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, Musburger's right-hand man. I tell you what, Danny will lay it down for the weekend of wild card action in the NFL. Elijah, Nebraska football is known and expected to have dudes on the offensive line. Nebraska football is expected to have backups come in and perform when called upon on the offensive line. And I think Nebraska has recruited at a high level at the offensive line. They have not developed at a high level on the offensive line. I think those two forces meet this offseason with the recruiting and the development coming together. And I think it's okay to be excited for Nebraska's offense with two experienced quarterbacks, an experienced running backs room, and now experience that have been a part of this football program on the offensive line. It's not gone the way that Teddy or Benhart or Turner or Nuri have wanted. But those guys have all played a lot of football, not necessarily Teddy, but we see what Teddy can be if he can stay healthy. And now you add in not just Scott at center with a season under his belt, but now Walter Rouse, 39 starts, a finalist for the academic Heisman, some sort of biology major. It's not just regular old
engineering.
Biochemical engineering. Thank you. That equals SMART. Okay, that's what that means. He's a brilliant guy, and he's a grown-up. And while you have Walter Rouse that's got a bit of a shoulder issue he's got to work through, He'll be ready by training camp. He is an option at tackle. He's a guy that's from a pro-style run-first offense with Coach Shaw. And one thing you know about Stanford is, despite the fact they've been down, they put guys in the league on the lines of scrimmage for the better part of that Harbaugh to Shaw transition, and that's going on 12 years. Stanford gets the smartest guys. Stanford gets some of the biggest and best dudes on the line. Should their team be better? Yeah. But what is reality is Nebraska has a chance to get a guy like Walter Rouse to compete for a starting spot, to make options available for Coach Raiola. And think about what type of lineup you can have. Teddy, Turner, Nuri, Lutowski, Piper, Scott, and Walter Rouse. Any which way you want to shake it, you have guys that have played tackle. Ben Hart's made 11 career starts. Is he a better guard? Let's see, right? You have that option now, perhaps. Turner Corcoran has played both tackle spots and a guard. Let him settle, be healthy, and let him go kick ass at one of those spots. You have Scott, I'm going to pencil in at center, call me crazy. And then you have Rouse that can play either that left or right tackle spot, depending on where you're comfortable. I'm thinking left tackle. And then you've got a trio of guards and a guy that you can groom to back up Scott at center. All the while, Elijah, you can get the linemen you've recruited in the weight room and have a season to just get better. They're not freshmen. They're not redshirt freshmen being thrown in. You have options with guys that have started a lot of ball games in Lincoln and need to be better. And you have a couple of guys that have played well in the Pac-12 coming here. It's a monster win. And quite frankly, very well targeted by Rule and this staff to go after meat and potatoes. Guys on the line. Guys like Scott, guys like Rouse on the line. It's not the skill guys Nebraska went portaling for a year ago, but it's on the line of scrimmage. It's kind of putting their money where their mouth is when they talk about the importance of line of scrimmage play. You've seen Rouse's film. Dude's built. He's a beast. He's 6'6". He's 220. He can move and he can fire off the ball. I'm not trying to give him a Lombardi already, but it's just a nice high-level guy to add to this team. And you have a good offensive line, you're going to have a better offense. I think that's fair math.
And I do want to clear up one thing. I misspoke. Not biochemical engineering, biomechanical engineering. I don't know what the difference between those two are. All I know is it does mean, as you said, he's a smart kid. I mean,
it's a Stanford degree, brother.
You can say that again. And what I'll say about Rouse in his film is there was something that I learned in the Journal Star article today that I did not see watching his film, and it kind of makes some things check out. He was actually dealing with a shoulder injury all last season long, had to undergo surgery at the end of the season. That's why he wants to come back and play another season of college football, because he didn't feel like he lived up to his own standard. And that makes sense, because what I saw on film from him is a guy who's got the tools. And you could say that about a lot of Nebraska's offensive linemen over the past couple of years, and about a lot of the guys they have within the program right now. They're toolsy guys. You hear that about baseball players and quarterbacks. They got the tools. They just got to put it together. I'd say the same about Rouse. I don't think he's ever quite lived up to the billing that he got whenever he was coming into college, but 30-plus starts speaks for itself. I mean, you can say the same thing about some players at Nebraska over the past couple of years, where if, say, Turner Corcoran went in the transfer portal, some other school out there would say, well, he's got 20-plus starts underneath his belt. He's got Big Ten experience. That's a big piece. And the Husker fans who look at him say, well, yeah, he does have all those starts under his belt, but he's still got some things he needs to work on, but he's got the tools. I'd say the same about Rouse. He's got all these starts underneath his belt. It speaks to his quality as a football player that he was able to get all those starts, but there are still things that he needs to work on. I'm not sure he's a ready-made Big Ten athlete right now. Could he be in a couple of months? Sure, with the strength and conditioning program, with the correct coaching, but he's a toolsy guy. He's got the tools. We'll see if he can put it together, because I think that's kind of been the story of his career at Stanford. He's been good enough to start, but he's not been good enough to live up to that billing that he had whenever he was a recruit stepping foot on campus. He's got, as you mentioned, the ability to fire off and run block. He's got the ability to pass block, but I don't think whenever you look at what his frame is an NFL offensive lineman. Yet he's never quite lived up to that billing during his time at Stanford. Could that be the pieces around him? Maybe. Could it be the coaching? Maybe. You don't really know. I don't think he's quite lived up to the standard that Stanford fans expected whenever he came in there. But I'm not saying he's not a guy who's not going to start next year. That's very possible, but he's going to have to earn it because there are things in his game that I think he needs to work on. Specifically, flexibility needs a little bit of work, which we've seen that with Husker offensive linemen in the past couple of years as well. Like, he's going to fit right in with this room in terms of being a guy who he comes in with all these starts, all this experience underneath his belt, got some things he needs to work on. But I think with the right coaching, with the right strength and development this offseason, during one offseason, he could step in and be a starter come the fall. But I'm not saying he's good enough to do that right now. With that all being said, a very, very nice piece to add to this offensive line room. I think he's going to help out in some way, shape, or form, most likely on the field, but even if not, 39 starts underneath your belt is going to be a big help in terms of leadership, in terms of experience off the field.
It's an option, right?
And it brings competition.
It's competition. It's an option. And if somebody's not getting it done, Raiola can go and put somebody in, give somebody else a shot. And this isn't Y ball where I got to play every second quarter, even though I shouldn't have been on the court. This is go out, go make plays, do your job, and be able to run the football on 3rd and 2 or inside the red zone, okay? And with Nebraska, let's just put this in pencil right now. As you look at the lineup, do you go with comes back healthy, wins the job, Rouse at left tackle? Do you put or do you put Teddy's got a lot to say about that. Do you put Teddy at left tackle, go Turner at left guard, Scott at center, you have Newelly at right guard, and then at right tackle you can go Turner. I've already said I've said Turner twice. Forgive me, but you get my point here.
Teddy,
let's look at
Teddy,
this.
I think.
Yeah, you go Teddy left.
Teddy. Okay, here's how I see it. I'm going to lay it out.
Teddy left, and do you put Rouse at right?
Rouse
and
at
then
right.
You have Turner
or Bryce could win that. This is what I was kind of getting at with my point, in that I'm not ready to pencil him in as a starter just yet because he's got things to work on. But how I could see this line shaping up with Rouse's experiences on the left side, you can go Rouse left tackle, Nuri left guard, which in terms of run blocking is a very strong left side of your line. That's what both of those guys excel at. You got Scott at center. You probably go a couple options at right guard, to be fair. 3 or 4 different guys. That spot's still up in the air. And then you have the option between Teddy and Bryce at right tackle. That's kind of how I see it.
Teddy's played mainly left, so he'd have to learn right. Not that he can't, but he's been at left, and that's where he's.
Or do you give Teddy a year coming off another knee injury to, you know what, sit behind a guy who's got all this experience in the Pac-12 and Rouse, learn some things from him, be a competent backup, because more often than not in the Big Ten with the rigors of the season, your number is going to be called as a backup left tackle or anywhere on the offensive line. At some point during the season, it could be a series, it could be a game, it could be a couple of games, your number will get called. Do you leave Teddy back there to, you know what, get another year of maturation underneath your belt? You haven't really gotten that since you've been on campus. Focus on your craft, focus on getting bigger in the weight room during the season, step in when we need you, and then you're going to be our starter next year. That's a very real possibility with what could be going on with Teddy. All I know is what this move brings Donovan Raiola, as you says, it brings experience, it brings options, and it brings competition. There will be competition in this offensive line room. I wouldn't say there's a single spot along the offensive line, barring maybe Scott, but he's a transfer in. But, I mean, pretty much there's not going to be a spot along the offensive line that I don't think whoever gets that spot isn't going to have to earn and isn't going to have to go beat out other people for. And I can't say the same about the offensive line last year.
Well, and it's not only do you have to earn it and win it, but you got to hold on to it. Right. I mean, you got to hold on to that spot. That's key. And what I don't want, easier for me to sit here and say, is I want, if I'm a Nebraska fan, I want everybody to stay in that room. You may not win a job, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get a few series. It doesn't mean you're not going to get a chance to improve your game. And from a offensive mindset, identity standpoint, work as a unit together in the room, a second year with Coach Raiola, but really a first year, to be fair, with Raiola, in my opinion, having a voice that'll be heard on offense with the coordinator and Satterfield's vision of playing smash mouth football and what Rule wants to do, the incorporation of a running quarterback, more of a dual threat on offense. We'll talk to Brandon Vogel coming up here, get his penciling in of who could go where on the offensive line, because it's quite frankly a nice problem to have for the first time in a while. Competent options for Nebraska at the tackle spots, be it Teddy or Rouse or Benhart or Turner Corcoran. I mean, those are four bodies that have played a lot of football. Three of the four have played a lot of football. Teddy being the guy that, beyond injury, has shown a high level and a high ability. You have a plethora of guards to choose, and then you need someone to be a swing tackle. You also need someone to be a backup center, assuming Scott does win the job. So you can be excited about your offensive line prospects for Nebraska and the targeting that's gone in on where they go in the portal. And those offensive line guys with experience are gold, and you hope they hit as well as the skill guys did last year with a Thompson and a Palmer. Brandon Vogel checks in. We'll hear from both coaches that spoke today. Hail Varsity with you on a Thursday, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. For all your football needs and basketball, baseball, hoops, Hail Varsity Magazine. Get that subscription. Get the digital bundle, hailvarsity.com/offer. Managing editor with Hail Varsity, Brandon Vogel, joining us from his palatial football office. Vogues, what's the logo on the camo hat, man?
It's just an Artifact Bag Company out of Omaha. So, maker of fine bags and hats.
Rich mahogany and plush leather, too, I would assume.
Actually, their bags do have very rich leather, I guess. Maybe we'll combine the two.
How about Vogel with the free shout out here?
Oh, I just
yeah.
Vogues has a sweet hat about every appearance, so I had to ask about that. So Elijah and I were trying to get our not ink but pencil out and write out the starting five of the offensive line with the addition of Walter Rouse. A lot of ground to cover here with the two assistants talking and Kevin Warren off to your Chicago Bears. But I want to start with Rouse and get your take here on, I guess, the Brandon Vogel starting 5 year way before spring ball even starts. How much has the radar increased here on what the O-line potential could be for you?
Yeah, I mean, Rouse, pretty big get in terms of the experience. You know, thinking about a prospective starting five there. Honestly, I might feel the best about two of the transfers in terms of slotting them in. Rouse, I would guess I would put him maybe at left tackle to start, though he could play right. And maybe Scott at center. I mean, center's the one where Nebraska obviously has kind of a hole to fill, one-to-one. So I think Scott makes a lot of sense there. Rouse at tackle, Nebraska has plenty of options there with returning players. Hasn't quite seen the results, so it wouldn't be a surprise to me at all if Rouse, with the amount he played at Stanford, honorable mention all conference, took one of those tackle spots. You get Newely back at guard. I think I would pencil him in if I had to at one of those spots. And really, that's about as much as I kind of feel good about. You'd have a number of options then for right guard and we'll call it right tackle for lack of a better term. Maybe you would put Corcoran on top at right tackle. Yeah, right guard, I think, feels pretty open. Also, another thing with thinking about the offensive line, being year one, being under a new staff, like it's tough to go young up there. But you look at the roster the other day, and two of those freshmen, Gatula and Newtson, are both listed at 300 pounds already. They're Walter Rouse size right now. When we'll see what it looks like when they show up, and by the time you get through all of off season and into fall camp. But if you're going to play early on the O-line, kind of year one in a coaching change year is probably the prime time to do that. I wouldn't say it's likely, but it does feel like it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Brandon Vogel's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Vogues, I didn't get a chance to say this last segment, but I'm going to say it now because it's something that's been on my mind. And that's that the return of Nuruddin Nueli, I think, is more important than either of the two transfer portal additions in Scott and Rouse, at least so far, with what he brought, a stabilizing force at left guard 2 seasons ago. The Huskers, I feel like, definitely missed him last year with as much rotation as there was at the left guard spot. And I think he may have even flown under the radar his first season at Nebraska. Is that a fair assessment that, you know what, the return of Nuruddin could be more important than anyone they could get in the transfer portal?
I don't know if it's more important, but I think it's in the discussion, and I think it's a lot harder to look at that and say, hey, don't miss this piece of it, because I agree with you. I think it was pretty important looking at how that line performed this past year. You know, that's not all due to his absence, but I think it was a factor. And, you know, with his situation, I still think back to like how he personally handled that, putting that information out of like, hey, this was my mistake. And like, I think you're going to have a pretty hungry player who is ready to come back and, you know, showed those flashes early on to even get that job and then keep it in 2021. You're going to have a hungry player, and I think you're going to see that by the time we get to the games in the fall.
And I think a factor that some people may forget is the fact that he spent all last football season not having to deal with injuries throughout the rigors of a Big Ten season. It was just weight room and practice field for him all season long, working on his craft. I feel like we might see a new and improved version of him that, again, after missing all last year, might fly under the radar up until week 1.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, yeah, you always hope you can make it through the off season without injuries anywhere, and that would certainly be one where you hope you avoid that, because, like you said, you do have that benefit of he had all of the time to focus on whatever he needed to focus on, whether that was strength, whether that was technique, some combination thereof, I'm sure. So it's a pretty ideal circumstances, I think, for getting him back.
Brandon Vogel joins us from HailVarsity.com and magazine at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter is where you follow him. Vogue's early impression here of E.J. Barthel and Evan Cooper. They both spoke today. They have kept up the energy tag that has been associated with much of Coach Rule's staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I was pretty excited to hear from these two in tandem specifically. You know, Barthel, kind of an interesting story coming over from UConn. Like, UConn had a really good season, an out of nowhere season, but still, you know, a lot of the college football landscape isn't paying a lot of attention to UConn until they have to. So that was kind of a little bit of an off the radar pick, at least for me, when I was thinking about it, and that's always intriguing. And you know, he came across to me as a really measured and engaging, likable coach. And I kind of expected that from Cooper. He was probably the assistant I was most excited to hear about, based on the things that we were reading and seeing from him in the lead up to this point. And he definitely checked all those boxes for me. He's a little bit wry. You can tell that the mind is always kind of going, and when he says, you know, things like he likes to grind film, but he also loves recruiting, but he also loves thinking about it from a draft perspective. Like, it's easy for that to come across in his words, which isn't always the case, you know, with coaches or just people in general. So if I was a recruit, I was buying from both of those guys, and that was just based on a press conference.
Folks, is it fair to say that these two coaches are probably the two that walk into Nebraska with the most talent already in their room? You can make an argument for linebackers as well, but when you look at each side of the ball, it really feels like secondary and running back have the most returning talent of any of the position groups on the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, one of the things that stuck out about EJ's time at the podium as he was kind of running through and making sure he had something to say about each of the running backs. You know, when he mentioned Ramir Johnson, a player he knew prior to Nebraska, he mentioned elite speed, which, you know, we know Ramir's fast. I don't know if, like, based on what we've seen from him at Nebraska, that would have been the first thing to come out of my mouth. So that certainly kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit with him. Made me think, hey, this is a guy who knew him before getting to Lincoln. He's been somebody we've kind of heard is like on his way. Didn't see it this year, which I think was the year we expected to see it most. So maybe 2023 will be the season where Vermeer finally gets a little bit more of a role. And then, Cooper talking about the secondary, that one surprised me less because I agree. Like, I think there is NFL talent there, and I do think it's a good range of kind of player types, player sizes, and a good mix of experience and young talent. So wasn't surprised at all there. If we had to choose one or the other, I'm probably taking the secondary as, maybe a little head in that race, but it's close.
Vogues, couple minutes here. Kevin Warren, his time as commissioner. What do you remember most? Do you remember the addition or the let's pause?
I think the addition is going to have to be the top line, the headline for whatever Kevin Warren retrospective I'm writing in the Big Ten. I'm not planning to write one, but if I were, that's it. It's that plus the new Big Ten deal. I mean, we knew the Big Ten was going to get its money somewhere, somehow. That one's a little bit more kind of, we'll see how it goes. The Big Ten is getting its money, not going to be on ESPN, which is, interesting. So we'll see how that plays out. I think for a lot of people, maybe those, who aren't Nebraska fans, who may take the, hey, remember when you paused football and everyone here hated it in your first couple of months on the job. I think how that Big Ten deal shakes out from a non-monetary standpoint, from a, attention and all of those things piece of it will go a long way to kind of retroactively defining that Warren tenure in the Big Ten.
Yeah, folks, I think you make a good point. I think as of right now, the COVID handling may loom larger than it will in 10 years. That may just be a footnote on the Wikipedia page. But when you look at this move to the Chicago Bears, feels like a bit of a weird move, except to get into the NFL, but it feels weirdly almost lateral with money and attention and whatnot. Do you think that he's eventually, trying to angle his way in and be the guy to replace Roger Goodell? Is that the end game here for Kevin Warren trying to make a move like this?
I think it could be, because I would agree in terms of like prestige, maybe there's not much difference either way. In terms of power, you're running one of the two most powerful conferences in college athletics. So maybe edge Big Ten on that one, to be honest. But I kind of, my read on that was, he came from the NFL. He might just be an NFL guy. And when he came in with the pandemic shutdowns and having to deal with that, renegotiate the TV deal, the beginning of NIL, the transfer portal becoming what it is today. It was this really shifting landscape in just those 3 years that Warren had in the Big Ten. So if he came in to that Big Ten job thinking, okay, this is, I'm ready to take a crack at this. You get into those waters, and they may not have been, they definitely weren't the waters you were totally expecting. Going back to the NFL, it's a little bit more, what to expect.
Brandon Vogel with us here on Hail Varsity, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. His book with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion, and read him with HailVarsity.com and magazine. Vogues, we'll check in Saturday morning. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, bud.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Brandon Vogel. Be sure to get the podcast with Hail Varsity Radio. Can watch the show on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, but also Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. All three platforms with your friends at Hurrdat that give you the option here, full show or different individualized segments. So we appreciate you subscribing, telling a buddy, and always the feedback is much appreciated, good, bad, or ugly. We like it. We'll spend a minute here on Commissioner Warren. It's official as he is off to the Chicago Bears. Three thoughts on my end. One, why? Why do you leave the Big Ten and probably $3 to $4 million a year for one of 32 franchises in the NFL? Vogue's hit on it. You came from the NFL. I believe he was with the Vikings for quite a while. So maybe it's just more of a comfort level for him. You've got chancellors and presidents you got to answer to in the Big Ten, and it's the academic and athletic world that collides. While it is the corporate world, and it is a monster business, the best and biggest business in sports, it's at least business in sports versus academics in sports, and sometimes the cheese and wine crowd and the jocks don't play nice together. So maybe he's just tired of it. He had a thankless job of who he had to replace because you had the Godfather, man. You had Don Corleone and Commissioner Delaney, who was always 8 steps ahead of everything and everybody in the world of sports, from TV deals to expansion and positioning the Big Ten for excellence. And then you saw a run of coaches coming to the Big Ten towards the last 7 to 10 years of Delaney's tenure. I don't want to say he was forced out. I don't know that, but it feels like, dude, I'm sick of this. Let me jump back to a landing spot I know and am familiar with, and maybe I can angle for the commissioner's job with Goodell. But I don't know that he's a guy, because people are going to point back to and go, I told you so here with COVID and the pandemic. It's not that he was necessarily wrong with pausing play. It's that he was the first to be wrong when there was zero communication with the other Power 5 conferences. The Big Ten and the Pac-12 thought they were going to show their brain off and their sensitivity in a crazy moment in our history with the pandemic, while two or three of the other leagues weren't ready to say let's shut it down. You look foolish having to retrace and then restart and not even consult some of your power brokers within your own league, because Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska were all freaking out about it, the fact that there was going to be no football. And you didn't do a good job putting out the fire of resentment and reaction. So I think things could have been communicated and handled better. As far as the TV deal, look, he didn't screw it up. He got everybody paid in the Big Ten, and he got the Big Ten to go coast to coast. UCLA and USC are going to be monster properties to have. They needed to go somewhere. At least you got them. Never landed Notre Dame. Not his fault, but at least that would have been one more monster get. But listen, it'll work. Vogel's point, Elijah, about SC, I should say, about not being on ESPN is something to think about. I don't want to waste too much time on Warren, because I think a lot of Nebraska fans are, dusting their hands off here. Wish him well. Never disliked the guy. Was always friendly enough to me when, and this is in line for a cup of coffee at Iowa City. This is he's friendly enough. I hope he does well. It just, there's some stains on his tenure, but it was a monster tenure to follow that was not fair. You're following the legend of Jim Delaney.
I'll just say, I think that history will look more kindly upon Kevin Warren 10 years from now. As I said, same thing to Vogel. I think whenever you look at what he was brought in as commissioner to do, it's easier to see now with the benefit of hindsight. He expanded the conference, added 2 major programs in USC and UCLA. He negotiated the next TV rights deal. He set up the Big Ten for the future. A little unfortunate, the timing of COVID, how he's a new guy on the job, less than 6 months of on-the-job training, and now COVID has thrown a wrench into all the Big Ten's plans, what they wanted with Kevin Warren. The timing wasn't great. The handling wasn't great. I think he learned lessons from that in terms of listening to your member institutions. You can't be as heavy-handed as a commissioner in college football as you were as a president in the NFL. So I think that was a learning lesson for him. I think he came back from that. I think he accomplished what he was brought in to accomplish as Big Ten commissioner now. the Big Ten's fine to see him go. I think he came in, did what he was supposed to do, got another point on his resume in terms of building his resume up to what I assume, and I don't think it's crazy to think that he is trying to angle towards being the NFL commissioner someday, at least someone really high up in that office. I think that's his end goal here. Got another piece in his resume. He can say, hey, I successfully led the Big Ten through COVID, through expansion, through a changing college football world, negotiated a new TV rights deal, jump back in the NFL. Now he's going to oversee the moving of the Chicago Bears from the historic Soldier Field to a new stadium. That's going to be another feather in the cap for Kevin Warren as he moves through his career. I think he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten member institutions got what they wanted out of Kevin Warren. I think the timing is right for him to move on. Husker fans, I don't think are sad, but I think you can say, you know what, Kevin Warren, you did a fine job bringing in 2 new schools in USC and UCLA. You did a fine job negotiating a new TV rights deal. I think aside from COVID, he was the right person for the right time for the Big Ten, but I think as you move forward with the Big Ten, it might even be best for both parties that there is a movement here. Kevin Warren can go back and continue his career movement, and the Big Ten can bring in somebody that now you don't have to worry about expansion and about TV rights, at least for a couple of years. You can focus on the conference itself, and the timing is fine with me. I have no hard feelings on Kevin Warren, and I have no strong feelings that he is leaving either. It seems to just be convenient that this timing of everything seemed to have worked out, and now it makes sense for both parties to move in a different direction.
I really think he wanted to pursue more expansion, and I think that got shut down. And if he thinks it's in the best interest to go after a Washington and an Oregon, for example, there were some murmurs of that a few weeks back, and he got shut down either by members in the school, and there was a disagreement there. Maybe he just says, look, dude, I'm out. Thanks for your time. But, yeah, we spent a lot of time on Commissioner Warren, and I think the Big Ten would be wise to go get a TV executive because that is the name of the game. It's not what was just signed and watching the ink dry for $1.5 billion, but it's the next round after a few years here of 12-team playoff, whether that continues to expand or how lucrative that can become. Let's hear a little bit here from some of Nebraska's assistants. Let's sneak in a couple of comments from Nebraska's secondary coach, Evan Cooper. And out of the gate, the why part, right? You have to tell kids why. We all wonder why. And Cooper explained why he came to Nebraska and wanted to be with Coach Rule again.
Me and Coach Rule are pretty close. And I've probably been talking to him throughout the entire process. And I just told him when he's ready for me, we'll hop on the jet and we'll go. And he said, well, how about tomorrow? And we hopped on the jet, and the rest is history. That was 6 weeks ago. The rest is history.
Pretty impressive. A little bit more here from Coach Coop when it comes to recruiting, eyeing talent, and that he is just a guy that loves all parts of football. That is scouting, that is development, and that is research. We'll wind down hour one. Hail Varsity continues. We are presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this first hour, it's Hail Varsity Radio presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find and follow us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt, that's me, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. As we will check in with Gary Barnett coming up here in about 10 minutes. We'll hear from E.J. Barthel, the new running backs coach here, around 5:20 or so. Danny Burke checks in at 5:40 from VSiN Sports Network. Get you the Wild Card Weekend playoff picks. A little bit more here from Evan Cooper and the trust. There's an abundance of trust with Rule, his hire, his guys on this coaching staff, young and old. And more from Coach Cooper here as to why Rule trusts him and his recruiting process.
We have really like minds. We have the same type when it comes to like people and players and talent levels. It's really easy for me, to be honest, because just the program and the way that we push the kids. Really, I just need to find the kids with the talent to be able to do it. And they don't always have to look exactly how they, how people think they should look. But if they have the talent, the necessary skills, the program will kind of push them to be great. in the classroom and on the field. The field will take care of itself. Like, we just ask them to do a lot of hard stuff, be 10%ers. And so it's just really easy for me. And I kind of feel like I cheated because I got this reputation, and I just learned it all from Coach. So, yeah.
A little bit more on how this recruiting class came together, because, Elijah, that's been a major wow factor locally and honestly nationally, where they started, who they retained, who they've added in the portal, and then the work they did from coast to coast all over the country to land a top 25 recruiting class, Cut 5.
So a lot of sleep is nice, a lot of film. And, Coach is probably always going to start at home. So a couple of the people that Coach had referenced from our own backyard. So we want to make sure that we don't let those guys. The worst thing is when you see all these All-Americans and all-conference guys and NFL guys from your own backyard, and you missed them, or you didn't do whatever. You didn't do your homework, or even you got out-recruited sometimes. That's probably the worst thing. So it started there. I just tried to hit the ground running with the local guys and then work my way out. But, yeah, a lot of sleep is nice. Coach calling me calling Coach. You just constant communication about it. And, again, I know what he's looking for. I know what's been successful in one of his programs, so it's kind of easy.
He's uber confident with the hand in glove here, Elijah, with knowing rules, expectations, his wants, what works, because he's been a part of it, and it feels seamless. Still got to go do it on the field, but as far as the personnel they want to get, it's a same target here.
And I think it's interesting. We're a little short on time here, Schmitty, so sure. I just want to paraphrase what point I think you're going to bring up, which is he's talking about why he has an eye for talent. And that was one of the most insightful things, where he's like, growing up, I just come from a football family. My grandma knows football, my mom knows football, my aunt knows football, my dad knows football, my uncle knows football. Everyone knows football. And growing up, I wanted to be just like Mel Kiper. I thought that was very insightful of, like, I grew up doing scouting reports when I was 8 years old, the guys I watched on TV, and it just came seamlessly whenever I came into coaching. That, like, one of my passions seemed to fit perfectly with this profession. I thought that was super, super interesting of, like, a kid, he didn't dream of being a football player growing up. He wanted to be like Mel Kiper, like the guy on TV.
I'm going to have Mel's hair, and I'm going to put a suit on, and I'm going to be hammering during draft day. And he knows what to look for in a future pro. That's big. Gary Barnett with us to kick off Hour 2 on Hail Varsity.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, and we say hi to Hall of Fame coach Gary Barnett as he is enjoying the sunshine. And, Coach, dare I say putting greens that are a little too fast for you?
Well, it just depends, But, a little too fast right now. I'm not playing very well, so I'm struggling. So
hey, but you're playing.
I need to find something else to do.
I doubt that. I think you're still really pretty good on the old golf course. Coach, just a tough way to end for TCU. Let us start there. And Georgia with an exclamation point. That's too bad. Great semifinals, not so much the championship game.
Yeah, no, TCU had they'd been rolling the dice all year. They'd fallen behind 7 different times and came back each time, but it wasn't like coming back against Georgia. And so it was, they didn't play anybody like Georgia. And so when it came time to do it, they just couldn't do it. And they were a little outmatched. And, you can glean a lot from that game, and everybody who has an opinion will. And, you take one team that's been built on transfers and another team that's been built from the inside up, and you wonder in the long run whether that's the future, whether that's going to always be that way, that you can get yourself there with transfers, but I don't know if you can win it all. We'll have to see. But there's a school of thought that leans in that direction, and I'm not sure. But 3 of the 4 teams that went into the championship game were all built from the inside up. And but they also traditionally get the best players no matter what. So it's not hard to do.
Well, that's a fair point, and you got to retain your talent so you can watch the talent flourish or develop that talent and then have the depth. That's what blew me away, Coach Barnett, was the freshmen that were championship level ready. The big old bear, right, on the defensive line for Georgia, just as one example that comes to mind, that Georgia's got really good guys that are young, but they're not forced to play. They're young pups. If they do play a young guy, it's because he's really good and ready. And Georgia was just able to do line change after line change defensively, at least. Well,
they were. And the other thing is those weren't freshmen anymore.
Right.
Those were technically sophomores. And so, the great teams like that, they don't only just recruit well, they develop well. And we can say all we want out there about 5 stars and 4 stars or whatever star. It's the coaches and programs that develop those stars that make a difference. And they're the ones that are sustainable. And they're the ones who are sitting there at the end of the year on top. And it's a formula. It's hard to follow. It's hard to get fans sometimes to follow that. That's the instant gratification, the development, just the thought of development isn't a popular item with many fans. So it's, it's an inside deal, and you just got to do it on the inside and not worry about it.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, what do you think of Kirby Smart, how he's settled in, and kind of what he's doing with the Georgia program? Is Georgia the best job in college football?
You mean Alabama East? It probably is because of the recruiting base, and not that Alabama's is any much different than that. But it might be the best. I don't know whether access to like Atlanta makes it better. We always felt like that helped us at Northwestern was access to the city, but I don't know. Both of those jobs are excellent, and Kirby's he's learned well. And he's put his spin on it and his way of doing things, and it's a great job right now. And it's going to be hard to beat those guys next year.
They are loaded up. When you look at Georgia, where do they rank for you as far as best teams you've seen, and who is the best college football team that you've either gone up against or seen from the analyst chair?
Well, I think there's 3 teams that really stand out to me. One is the 2001 Miami team, which beat you guys and all the draftees on that team. I think the LSU team a couple years ago in 19 was about as good a team as you could find. And then I'd say this Georgia team. I mean, you can't go back-to-back and win 65-7 without saying that is one heck of a football team. So, I mean, those 3 teams stand out to me right away.
The Miami team was incredible. That was not a good Rose Bowl for Nebraska. LSU with the guys that are doing the work in the NFL in 19 make a ton of sense. That defense wasn't bad either. This Georgia team, Nebraska's run in the mid-90s was up there as well with just how high level, and you look at the draft picks and the depth, and I guess I'm going to ask you this: what would the game have been like with the 01 Buffs versus the 01 Canes?
It's hard to say because we mentally were so up. I mean, we were. Instead out our despair on Oregon, we chose to feel sorry for ourselves. And so I don't know what kind of effort we would have gotten. I know we were jacked up to play. We wanted to be in that game. We knew that it was, we knew it was going to be close as to whether we got in or not. So it's hard to say. But that Miami team was really good, and we were really good as well. But we'll never know. And but I know our guys would have been really up for that game as opposed to the game they played.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, a thought? You see all the Pac-12 ball you can. Nebraska able to add a couple of different Pac-12 players. Scott, the center, and Walter Rouse. Rouse, an offensive tackle, 4-year guy for Coach Shaw, and at one point a freshman All-American. Do you remember much about Rouse? Does he stick out to you?
Yeah, I do, and he's a really good player. And what happens is you spend your 4 years, you get your degree, you just want to, you want a different environment, and you're an age where you don't really hang out with the freshmen and the sophomores. You're an older guy. You need to go see the world, and so that's why that move gets made. But it's a great move for Nebraska, getting the kid from Arizona State, because of his experience, has got to be a good move. I don't remember him as well, but I do remember the kid from Stanford.
It's a big get, and with Jeff Sims also at quarterback, he's battled some injuries. He was thrown in pretty early at Georgia Tech, and I think they were making a transition from an option offense to more of a spread look. So with surrounding talent, you wonder if it was square round hole. But with Sims, the question with him is accuracy. I think he's got a good deep ball, and he's really talented runner if he can stay healthy. Coach, there's a lot of additions going on here with Coach Rule. An interesting mailbag with Andy Staples going on when it comes to year one turnarounds. We talked a little bit about that with Nebraska and where they can go under Rule. But, the quarterback spot and the offensive line, as you look at Nebraska's offensive line, these additions got to be good. And it can really help form an identity. And, Coach, really, we don't know if Nebraska's had much of an identity the last few years on offense. They've not been able to hang their hat on anything.
Well, and that's true. But, you're getting a group of experienced coaches. You're getting guys who work together. You're getting, you're getting a situation where people are used to high-level teams that they're playing and used to high-level coaching. So, all this is going to work out well for Nebraska. They're going to be formidable. They're going to be better. And, what Coach Rule's identity is going to be, we'll just have to wait and see what it is. But, I know they were very physical on defense at Baylor and balanced on offense. So my guess is they're going to do just fine.
What do you make of Garrett McGuire? Do you know much about him? He's a youngin' that got hired as the receivers coach for Nebraska. He was at Carolina, and, of course, he's Joey McGuire's son.
Yeah, I don't know much about him at all. So it's, but if my guess is if Matt thought he was the guy, then he's the guy. So, he'll do a good job, I'm sure.
Did you have reservations about hiring Young? What was or did you just hire the best? Didn't matter the age?
No, I always wanted a smattering a little bit. I didn't mind how young or old they were in the offensive line for sure. And same thing in the secondary. I didn't need a young guy in the secondary. I need somebody who's got some scars on them. And so, so that didn't bother me. Linebackers, same way. But I didn't really, age was never an issue to me. I wanted the best fit and the best coach.
Did you know right away Coach Fitz, because he worked for you, did you know right away Fitzy was going to be able to go from player to coach, or was he already just a coach that that had a helmet on.
He was a coach with a helmet on. He was that way. I told our guys after a two-a-day practice in his sophomore year, I said, you're going to all go somewhere else to coach someday. You're going to want Pat Fitzgerald coaching for you because, he just had the knack. You could just, the way he did things, the way he observed things, the way he thought, he just had it, and you knew it right away.
Gary Barnett with us, Hall of Fame coach, Hail Varsity Radio. How has the week been locally and nationally with Coach Prime? I know he was on the set for the national title game. How do you think that went?
Well, I think he's just drumming up a lot of interest, and everybody has got Colorado. Everybody talks about Colorado on every sports talk show for the most part, or they did. I'm sure it's waning down a little bit, but, all of a sudden we're relevant, or at least people know where we are and who we are. He's picked up 20 transfers along with 15 signees and just got another one today, so he's at 21. And I'm not sure how all those numbers work, but he's turned over the roster completely. Now, he hasn't turned them over with guys like you just picked up from Stanford.
With Rouse, yeah.
Yeah. And you're getting guys that played at a lower level, but the roster's different than it was, and it needed to be different. So he's accomplished that, I think, at this point in time.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this with Harbaugh, because, I'm hearing both sides that he's going to end up staying at Michigan, or, Carolina's in the mix. There's Denver, but Caldwell's also interviewed for that job. I know you have friends in Denver. Would you consider the Denver gig, or do you think it's too big a hill to climb with the draft pick situation?
Oh, Chris, I don't think about it that much. I think Harbaugh is a good choice for Denver. Mm-hmm. As much for the quarterback situation as anything.
Sure.
I think he's one of the few guys that can go to, because he's already been there and successful at that level, he can go from college again back into that level, and I think do fine. Everybody that I know that worked for him at San Francisco really liked him. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to worry about what he said in the press. Nobody was watching him like they do now. The whole NIL deal and all the things that are going on in college football, he doesn't have to put up with that. Mm-hmm. Now, whether he's a right fit or not, it would seem like it would be to get somebody experienced rather than take another chance on another first-time coach. Mm-hmm. I think, Denver's done that 3 times in a row, and that hasn't worked out very well.
How close were you ever heading to the NFL? Were you?
I was close enough to interview and be in a position to probably accept a position, but it didn't take me long to realize that that's not who I was. And I knew it going into the interviews, but I sort of had an obligation to at least look and talk. But I wanted to be with 18 to 22-year-old mm-hmm. guys. That's who I am.
Who did you interview with? NFL?
Well, let's just keep that private.
I got 32 guesses. I'm kidding. Gary Barnett with us. Coach, you take care, and thanks for a few minutes today.
All right, Chris. Good being with you.
Good stuff from Coach Barnett. Hail Varsity Radio. We'll hear more from two of Nebraska's new assistants, E.J. Barthel. We will hear from him. Met the media earlier today. A little more from Coach Evan Cooper. Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Hail Varsity continues on a Thursday, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. Appreciate Coach Gary Barnett stopping by on the show tomorrow. Bill Dolman will join us. Brady Oltmans, Jacob Padilla, the tag team from HailVarsity.com and magazine. And then a Jeremiah Searles sighting. He'll get us set for the playoff weekend. Reminder to get buckled up, hands on the wheel, eyes in mind. Straight ahead, the driver has one job: to drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. So we'll hear a little bit more from E.J. Barthel, Coach Evan Cooper. Just a quick reset on those two position groups. Of course, Nebraska has plenty in the running back room, and Elijah, a lot of talent in that secondary that needed to be retained, and that was step one. That was step one for both of these coaches. Go do your thing on the recruiting trail to get the 2023 kids locked in, but keep a really solid group of guys with experience and talent in each room. And you look at some of the names and players you have in that running back room. You have Grant and, of course,
A.J. Allen.
A.J. Allen, and then Ramir is back, and there's history from the Jersey region with of course Barthel and Ramir. So a lot there. You have Hartzog to keep around, and Newsom also inking that NIL deal. Both those guys were solid, and some safety options that looks like will stick and stay. You're waiting on Miles Farmer to play his best football. I think he can be a definite playmaker. So Nebraska has guys that have plenty of experience. Can they take their game to a higher and another level under these two new coaches?
It's going to be interesting to see how the coaches and the players get along during spring football. As you said, there's talent in the room, but it's not a given that these coaches coming are going to be the best fit for these guys on the field. You would hope so. You would hope that these guys are able to be the best fit for the players that they are inheriting, but that's not necessarily the case. So I think we might see some movement post-spring just in that sense, where you realize, you know what, I've made it through 15 practices, and it's not that I don't like Nebraska. It's not I don't like being part of this team. It's just I think there could be someone else out there that understands me better and can coach me better. So that's something to watch. But that's why it's a learning process, not only for these coaches with what they're inheriting, but the players as well. I mean, I guess I said that backwards. The players have to learn new schemes, what these new coaches' styles are, but the coaches have to learn what players they have and not what's on film. They've seen what's on film, but once you get on a practice field, things change a little bit. What can this guy do that he hasn't put on film? It's learning process both ways, and as I was talking about with Vogel last hour, I think these are the two coaches we heard from today that have inherited the most talent in terms of returning production. So let's see what they can do with it.
Let's wrap up here a little bit with Coach Evan Cooper, specifically here with the portal and inheriting. We'll start with Cut 8, the portal, and then finish up here with inheritance here. This is Nebraska's secondary coach, Evan Cooper.
It's always the same formula. Bring in guys that you think fit you, your type, fit the program. The good guys, the guys that fit you, personality-wise, work ethic-wise. It's always the same. It's just a lot easier now because of the portal, and you have a bigger pool to choose from. But yeah, you always want some high school guys. If you just think about it like the NFL, like maybe the high school guys are draft picks. The portal guys might be free agents, but you still need the right kind of people in the program. So, yeah, we did a little bit of both.
More on what is in that room and what stuck out to Cooper on film.
I'm very pleased with what we have here. I think we have some NFL DBs on the roster, guys that look like the guys that just finished coaching. I think we have a good blend of young players, inexperienced players, older vets. Mature guys, guys who've been in programs for 4 or 5 years. I'm excited about it. I'm excited. Like, I love recruiting, but right now, I'm really looking forward to getting in and coaching. Like, that's like my first love. Coaching is like my first love. I just kind of know what coach likes, so we do the recruiting part, but I just can't wait to get to coach those guys. Like, I talk to Marquise Buford a lot, with his situation, and we just always talk. We have like minds, so I like those guys. I love Gifford. I love him. Like, what's there not to like? Quentin, those guys are great. Malcolm, we talk all the time. It's a good group. It's a good group. They play some good football. They play hard. They play hard. When you watch them, it's pretty good for me, because that's what the program is going to be based on, just hard work and playing hard and effort and toughness, and they have that, so it's been good. I'm excited.
Pretty good rundown. Some of the names you want to see do well next year if you're a Nebraska fan. To the running back room we go. E.J. Barthel led off his time in front of the podium today about what it means to be at Nebraska.
Well, I mean, to me, it's the original RBU, right? Yeah, that's the reality as a running back coach taking this job. I mean, this is one of the best jobs in the country. The tradition that's built here on running the football. I mean, I'm honored, honestly, honored to be the guy that's a part of that room and help lead those guys, because I know how important it is to this fan base that we run the ball effectively. And this is one of those jobs where you get the chills thinking about game day. And that's Rozier, Roger Craig. I mean, come on, Mon Green. Those guys are legends. You know what I mean? So it's like, to be part of that group in some way, some form. I worked with Amir Abdullah. Just to be part of that special group now is pretty special to me.
He also was a fullback, Elijah. So there's been lots of talk the last week about the fullback, finding a fullback on the roster, recruiting fullbacks, and then making do with some guys that could play fullback that may already be on the roster if you're going to go with that two-back set. And Barthel's a guy who knows what it looks like because he, at heart, is a fullback. That's what he did in college. You have the running back wants and needs. You want a guy that can get the tough yards but also hit the home run. More from E.J. Barthel on what he expects from the running backs when they get the football in Big Ten play.
I think it's a mentality. I really do. I think it starts with that. I think the running back to me is the ultimate team player. I think that for us, we need to be able to run the football and protect in pass protection and in block in the run game and be vital members of special teams. So the ultimate team player in my mind. And what I look for most in backs is their will and their mentality to not get tackled, right, and to run with a sense of violence upon contact, right. To me, that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for in guys. I want to make sure that we're striving to finish every single run. I think in the run game in college football and football in period, when you're able to run the ball effectively, I think you have a shot to win the game. I think you take the soul out of the defense when you're able to do that, dominate the line of scrimmage, which will be one of our principles here. So when you can do that, I think that's a mindset thing more than a physical thing. You got to want to be that way. So that's the number one trait I'm looking for. And ultimately, athleticism. You know what I mean? And you have to have a certain measurable and a certain speed to play at this level. But my job is to coach their eyes and help them understand where the ball is supposed to go and how to run the ball when they get there. And that's the biggest thing.
And Schmidt, what I love about that is what he said. I think the ability to run the ball takes the soul from the defense. Because how many times have you seen that? Think back to the past decade. The Melvin Gordon game against Nebraska. Nebraska's defense looked like it lacked a soul that game after the first quarter. You think back to the Michigan game, Scott Frost's first year, with their ability to run the football. Nebraska had a defense that looked like it was lacking a soul that game. And that's not saying that this is a defense that didn't want to be out there. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Michigan took the will from Nebraska's defense to want to be out there and want to take those body blows. I love that mentality from running backs coach. I wish you heard the same thing from Satterfield, and I'm not saying Satterfield's an anti-run the ball guy by any means, but that's just such a great mentality, and maybe that's the former offensive lineman in me perking up in speaking, but I find that to be incredibly true. If you can run the ball with success, you're going to take the soul from a defense. And I know it's a different topic altogether, but you look at the fact that in the NFL playoffs, the team that wins the rushing battle in the game wins almost 80% of the time. Like, it's not hard football. It is. There's a lot of intricacies, but simply put, it's a game of mano-a-mano, physicality versus physicality. And if you're the more physical team that can run the ball with more success, I do tend to agree. You know what? You're going to take that soul from a defense. It might not be in the first quarter, but as you get into the third and fourth quarter, those body blows are just going to rip that soul out of a defense. I love that.
No, and it's absolutely true. The answer is easy, but showing the work is the problem with a lot of football teams. Is sticking with a run game, being able to do it effectively, and then just out toughing your opponent on the line of scrimmage, and then winning in that fourth quarter. I mean, Nebraska, the great teams, that was their signature. You think of signature moves, right? Figure four leg lock, headlock, diamond cutter, whatever, dude. Go back to your professional wrestling repertoire, and you have a finishing move. And Nebraska's move was always, by that fourth quarter, an opposing defense was just beat to hell. No answer. 4-yard gains were 40-yard gains. And you just could not stand up. You wilt, you failed, you fell because of the physicality and what Nebraska was able to do in the ground game. Matt Rule wants to run the football. You know Raiola wants to run the football. Coach Barthel wants to take a lot of souls this football season. It's hard to do that on a consistent basis in the Big Ten. Let's spend a little bit here on the inheritance again in that running back room. Coach Barthel touched on some of the guys back in that room.
Overall impressed. Truthfully, I thought, after evaluating the tape and looking at some of the guys in the roster, familiar with some of them at other places, at Ramir at a high school. We got similar tracks. I coached at Bergen Catholic High School, so I'm familiar with Ramir and just really excited about the group. A lot of potential out there, and how they run the football, and I'm excited to work with the whole group. Really am.
So the rundown is there, and they all have pretty good traits that he detailed and what he's seen on tape. We'll have a little bit more tomorrow. We'll get into some best bets next. Danny Burke will join us from VSiN Sports Network. It is going to be a wild card weekend. Who's Danny taking? Who's he fading? Who's he live betting? And we'll get it to you next. Hail Varsity continues, and we're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. It's Burke's Best Bets time. Danny Burke from VSiN Sports Network in a playoff weekend. Danny, how's it hanging? Have you celebrated Kevin Warren to Chicago yet? And if so, how have you celebrated?
Not necessarily celebrated just yet. The jury's still out on the guy who didn't want us to have college football. Nah, I'm just playing around. But it could only be good things in terms of the development you would imagine of the potential stadium in Arlington Heights for the Bears, considering he played a hand in the Vikings' new stadium. He kind of brings more of a, real feel, top-tier organizational approach instead of just having the family run everything. So from a legit end, this is probably going to be a huge step in making this Bears team feel like an actually just maturely run organization, maybe the appropriate way to put it.
Well, Danny, if Kevin Warren had stepped in preseason and stopped this Bears season before it happened, canceled it, what would it have changed? You guys still would have gotten the first overall pick if you would have forfeited every single game this year, and you would have had to deal with the pain of watching the Bears this year. it seems like a win-win.
Well, that's true, although we would have missed some of the great Justin Fields game. But you're right. You would have had guys who would have been more healthy. So, I guess if he can use some of those powers for the games we don't want to play in, then it's going to be a viable hire.
Danny, let's look at the playoff menu. And Saturday, how are you feeling about those matchups? Do you like the points in Seattle or no way, no how? And let's talk Chargers and Jags with two of the best and youngest quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, sorry to your son Carson here, Schmidt, but I'm going to be fading the Seahawks in this game. Look, you got the number one overall defense, according to DVOA in San Francisco, taking on the 21st-ranked defense in Seattle. Now, going even further, the Seahawks are 25th against the run, and we know that San Francisco can scheme you to death in terms of how they can attack you on the ground game, which will take some of the pressure off of a rookie quarterback, Brock Purdy. Although he's looked great, it is still a playoff game, and it's in a game that is going to feature some perhaps intense weather issues with the wind and the rain. So you can really hone in on handing the ball off to your amazing acquisition this season and Christian McCaffrey. Have that behind your stout offensive line and expose this really poor Seahawks run defense. So look, I know the line's kind of gotten out of hand. It's at 9.5, as high as 10. So what I did is actually tease down the 49ers. And really, I don't mind laying it, but because of the weather and, again, because of Brock Purdy being a rookie and it is a division game in the postseason, a little bit of a cushion under a field goal I think is the right way to approach it with San Francisco. But also, let's just face the facts. Geno Smith has been playing like the Geno Smith we knew he was coming into this season. Then we found out, all right, he can have something, but it's not going to be that long because he does have 7 interceptions in his last 7 games. He has failed to eclipse a completion percentage of over 62% in the last 3 games. Also in that span of the last 3 games, he has not thrown for over 215 passing yards. I get it. They love to run the ball with Kenneth Walker, and I'm sure they'll emphasize that even more so in this weather-led game. But again, you're going up against one of, if not the best run defense in San Francisco. So the head coaching advantage, the quarterback advantage, the overall team advantage all lies with San Francisco. So for a little security, I teased them down. And really quick, I'll just tell you the team I teased them with. I did tease them with Cincinnati. The Bengals this morning in Illinois were laying 8 in the hook. I know now it's about 9 in the hook. But look, if you have to use a 7-point teaser with San Francisco, you're going to have to use it for Cincy. So I got them to -1 in the hook. But if you have 9.5, taking it down to 2.5, you're still under the key number 3, and I think that's fine because Lamar Jackson is not playing this weekend. Even if he was, he hasn't taken a meaningful snap in a game or practice in over a month. And now Tyler Huntley looks like he may be banged up, so you may be getting Anthony Brown in a playoff game on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that absolutely deserves to be here, deserves a shot at the Super Bowl, a defense that has vastly improved, especially in the second half, and an offense that is led by an absolute stud in Joe Burrow. So I paired them with the Bengals down to under the key number 3. So that's what I did with that first game in the teaser with the other partner. As for the Chargers in Jacksonville, look, I think this is going to be the most exciting game of the entire weekend. Mm-hmm. I actually ended up playing over 46.5 for the total at the price of -118. I got this on Monday morning. But you have a Jacksonville defense that, according to DVOA, is 31st in red zone defense, 27th against the run, 20th against the pass, and overall, just this outright defense, they're 30th against the pass. And we know the Chargers love to throw the ball. Justin Herbert is a beast. Now, I know Mike Williams is a little bit banged up, but honestly, with or without him, I still think they're going to be able to move the ball. Will that hinder their chances in winning? Sure, but I don't think it's going to hinder them still having scoring opportunities in aiding this total going to the over. And then you look at the other side. Yes, Brandon Staley, a defensive guy, finally, after a year and a half, has made adjustments defensively, and you've seen some improvements, but they are still dead last. They ended the season dead last in allowing the most yards per rush attempt at 5.4 to opposing tailbacks. And over the last 3 games, that increased to 5.8. So Jacksonville, with their weapons, their improving offense, will be able to establish the ground dominance with Travis Etienne, which will set up the play action, which will expose the secondary of the Chargers, and again, lead to more points. So I did over 46.5 for that game.
Danny Burke is with us here. It's Burke's Best Bets. And Danny, I was inclined to skip right past Miami and Buffalo, but with the 13-point line, I got to ask, why is that not included in your teaser? To tease down the Bills to a 6-point favorite.
Because when you're doing teasers, historically the most successful ones are when you're crossing the key numbers of 7 and 3, but when you're crossing 7, you're going up through the 7, so not necessarily right below it. And I'm not saying it's bad play and that it can't hit, and I do like the idea of that, but I would have wanted to do that earlier, so I wouldn't have had to pay more on the 7-point teaser, because if I'm paying more on a 7-point teaser, you know, some books it's anywhere from like -130 to -140, some do -150, but the standard should be like -130 to -140 range. And so basically, if I'm paying that much, I don't want to have to sweat out still like a pretty sizable spread. I want it down to where they just have to win by a field goal, which it lands on that a lot. And I know it lands on a touchdown a lot, but still, that's still asking a team to cover by 7, which I do believe they will, and I'm not talking anybody out of it. I just don't care to tease down a team from double digits. The Stanford long teaser, again, historically the most successful. You tease down home favorites of just over 7, so you cross down to the key number of 7 and 3, or you're teasing up home and or road underdogs from, say, +2.5, over 3, and over 7. So when you're doing it from the teams, you're only crossing the one key number instead of 2 of them. So that's why I didn't do it. But look, the time to jump in on Buffalo was right at the beginning of the week because you kind of knew or figured that Tua wasn't going to play. And this was going to be the third time around, and the Bills with a lot of momentum coming into the postseason and a lot to play for, certainly. Under 10 would have been the right spot to do it and not having it in the teaser. But I've got nothing in this game with Skylar Thompson on the other end.
There's not even any player props you like in that game. It's the playoffs.
For that game, look, you would want to do something with Josh Allen, and maybe you could do his passing touchdowns over 1.5. But maybe be careful a little bit in terms of his pass attempts and pass completions, just because if you do believe that the Bills cover this number, well, they're not really going to stress Josh Allen throwing it consistently. They're a team that needs to get their run offense get going, and they should do that in this game where they know they're a big favorite and can easily win. So, again, you probably just want to get your guys safe and out of there and not leave them vulnerable or open to any mistakes. So maybe, if anything, you'd look at rushing props with the Bills, assuming they get a big lead, hold on to it, wind down the clock, and try to get confidence in that running game. But I didn't do any props in the playoffs just because it's a little bit wonky. Everything kind of changes, and the sample sizes are different. It's just a little bit more unique in the postseason, why I don't seek out as much for these player props. They do have some leans, but I don't think I'm going to jump in on any for this week.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down here, Hail Varsity Radio, Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, and follow Danny at Danny Burke 5 on Twitter. Catch him weekends on VSiN. Danny, Minnesota and the Giants, a thriller the first time in the regular season. Does Minnesota break hearts, or do they move on?
This game has me just left in shambles. Look, on paper, the Vikings should win this game. They should be the better team, and it really shouldn't be a discussion. But the argument absolutely can and should be made that Brian Daboll is the better coach in this spot. I mean, I like Kevin O'Connell. That's why I love the Vikings coming into this season. And, yeah, they've cashed me some tickets, but this is a different beast. Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, T.J. Hockenson, Kirk Cousins, we shouldn't even be having a discussion right now of who should win this game. Yet we are, because Minnesota has an inability to win comfortably, to do something stout on defense. Their defense kills them, and sometimes if they can't get that running game established and filter in the play action, they're trailing immediately. Look, the Giants are a rushing defense that allows the second most yards per carry. I believe the number is at 5.2. So, again, if Dalvin Cook can get established early and you factor in the play action, that is the bread and butter for this Minnesota offense. But if you look at what happened in that first game, Christmas Eve, Vikings beat the Giants 27-24. Minnesota made Daniel Jones actually look like an NFL quarterback and then some. The Duke went 30 of 42 for 334 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Barkley had 84 rushing yards and a touchdown. The Giants actually averaged more yards per play, 6.7, compared to the Vikings' flat 5. Vikings went 3 of 4 in the red zone when the Giants only went 1 of 2. And the Giants had 2 turnovers, but that's kind of uncharacteristic because they have a +3 turnover differential and the second fewest giveaways in the NFL. If they can limit those mistakes, I would not be shocked if the Giants win this game. Again, I think Minnesota should because they have a good home field advantage and they have the better players, but I just don't know how you can trust them with this number at 3. If you like Minnesota, wait to see what the tempo of this game is and then live bet it. Otherwise, I honestly would probably feel a little bit more comfortable taking the points with the Giants or teasing them up.
Danny, last thought here. Cowboys, Buccaneers, got about a minute left. Are you betting against Tom Brady in the playoffs?
I personally am not. Now that this line's moved down to 2 in the hook, I think you're in a prime position to tease up the Bucs. Again, you're crossing the key number of 3, crossing the key number of 7. Dak Prescott hasn't done anything impressive, and I don't trust Mike McCarthy. I don't trust Todd Bowles, but I trust Tom Brady. With the play that I made, though, I did the first half under 22 in the hook. Tampa has the number 1 ranked first half defense according to DVOA. Dallas is 22nd offensively. Tampa's 14th offensively. Dallas is 15th defensively. But the Bucs limiting opponents to just 9 first half points per game. Dallas allowing 11. Tampa Bay averaging less than 9. They're at 8.6, and Dallas is averaging 13.2. The only time Tampa Bay gets an offense is in a 2-minute drill, and that's not going to occur at the beginning stages of this game. Dallas will be limited by the Bucs defense that is a little bit underrated. I think it's going to be a slower effort, so first half under 22.5 points.
Danny Burke with us, VSiN Sports Network at Danny Burke 5. It's where you find him on Twitter. Catch him on VSiN's network throughout the weekend in the NFL playoffs. Danny, thanks for the time. Thanks for the insight today.
You got it, fellas. Enjoy Wild Card Weekend.
That'll do it for us here on this Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Make sure you check out the podcast, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, or check us out, the video streaming portion on YouTube. That's Hail Varsity's YouTube page. Check it out. Posted up shortly following the show. We'll talk to you tomorrow from 4 to 6. Schmidt will be back, and that's when we'll talk to you again.